I heard a song years ago, and as soon as I heard that song, I related to that song. I said, okay, that's me. And every time I hear that song, I think the same thing still today. And I'm going to read a few of the lines of that song to you. Now, you're going to sit here and think as you hear this, I can't believe this guy's a minister. Or maybe you'll think, this guy's our minister, and he relates to this song. The song it's a Simon and Garfunkel song. Some of you older people might recognize Simon and Garfunkel, called I Am a Rock. And it goes like this: a winter's day in deep and dark December. I am alone, gazing from my window from the street below, a freshly falling shroud of snow. I am a rock. I am an island. I've built walls, a fortress deep and mighty that none may penetrate. I have no need of friendship. Friendship causes pain. Its laughter and loving I disdain. I have my books and my poetry to protect me. I'm shielded in my armor, hiding in my room, safe within my womb. I touch no one, and no one touches me. I am a rock. I am an island. And a rock feels no pain. And an island never cries. For years, I saw myself as a loner. I'm not good with people, just to let you know. I'm not. I had friends back then, but I kept them at a distance. I didn't want them to get too closely. By nature, I'm an introvert. A lot of people, when they hear the word somebody's an introvert, they think, oh, he's shy. No, I'm not shy. An introvert it does not mean you're shy. It just is the way we deal with people. And when I'm around people, I just feel the energy being sucked out of me. Introverts, we recharge our emotional batteries alone, away from people. And there's still times I need to get away by myself and recharge. My wife has learned, because my wife is an extrovert, by the way. She gets recharged when people's around. She loves crowds. I hate crowds. Okay? She tries to pull us to crowds. I try to drag us back from crowds. It's fun. But she's learned over time that when I crawl into my hole in my cave, just to leave me alone. Because I'm a better person later on if she does that. I told Denise that I could have been happy alone. Because there was a time that I thought about being like a hermit in life. And even now in my alone thoughts, I sometimes dream still of being such. I still struggle when I'm around crowds. But Christ changed all that. As a Christian, I learned the importance of having other people involved in my life and being involved in theirs. As Christians, we're at a greater risk when we're alone. It increases our chances of getting ourselves into trouble. In addition to putting on love, which we're called to do as Christians, we need to develop an attitude of openness of our lives, of ourselves, to one another. We need to break down our walls of privacy and let other people in. And we do that. We have walls like you see in neighborhoods today. You go into neighborhoods, and at one time, neighbors, their houses were open, their backyards were open, and they could visit with one another. You knew who your neighbors were, and you're outside, and you might have a little chain link fence, and you'd talk with them over the fence. Those days are gone because now we have fences that are 7, 8, 9 feet high, made of wood that you can't even see through, much less know who your neighbor is on the other side. We need to break up. We build those walls in our own personal lives too, guys. We need to break them down. And this is something that's not taught much in the church. I've heard very few sermons and classes on it. Very few. It is the reason why I believe we're not very open in the church with one another. And we're not. Even ministers and elders don't understand the importance of being open. I know, I've been around them for quite a while. As a minister myself, I believe it's important to let people into my life and to get to know them and theirs. And this has surprised me. And some of you guys have told me this, is that you're surprised. I'll call people up and I'd like them to get with you and sit down and talk. And they're kind of shocked on the other end when I do that. And they tell me later on that I've never had a minister just want to get with me before. And I'm surprised at the number of people when I was a minister in New Jersey and since I've been here who have told me that. We need to get to know one another. And so today, and I told you last week, we're going to start a series on refining our focus. And today we're going to talk about the importance of openness. Because we need to be focused in that too. From the very beginning, the Bible acknowledges our need for companionship. In the Garden of Eden, right after God created man, do you remember or what he said? He said, it's not good that man should be alone. I'll make him a helper fit for him. See, God realized we need people in our lives. And so he created Adam. He created woman out of Adam by taking a rib to be his companion. And we can go on. Look in Proverbs chapter 18, verse 24. Proverbs 18, 24. It says, a man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. It's not just about having companions or friends. It's about having someone in your life that you can depend on. Do you have a friend in your life like that? Who sticks closer to you than a brother? We need people like that in our lives. Everywhere I've gone as a Christian, I've made sure I had someone like that in my life. When I went to New Jersey, there was a brother there, and I got with him one day. I said, I choose you. I choose you. You're going to be the person that's going to hear me at my worst. Because I need somebody like that. I need someone who can, and I knew he would be, and I said, I know you'd be honest with me. And I've told some brothers here that too. Because I need someone like that in my life to keep me straight. You show me a minister who's fallen into sin or an elder who's fallen into sin and into disgrace, and I'll show you a man who didn't have anybody in his life. Proverbs 27:17 says, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. This is someone like that is someone you can really grow with. It's someone you can be controversial with, and they're not going to leave you or abandon you or deny you. They're still going to love you, and they're going to stick with you. You can share things with him that you wouldn't dare share with anybody else. And this is a person who will say things to you that others won't bother to. As iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. Look in Ecclesiastes chapter 4. Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 9 through 12. It's right after Proverbs. Two are better than one, because they have a good return for their work. If one falls down, his friend can help him up. But pity the man who falls and have no one to help him. Also, if two lie down together, will they keep warm? But how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. God never expected us to go it alone. He never did. He knows the importance of companionship. He knows that there's strength, that there's protection in number. You want to know who wants you to do it alone? Satan does. Because see, one of the things he defeats us is by divide and conquer. Remember what Jesus told Peter that Satan wanted to do? He said, Satan wants to sift you. He wants you to pull you out, pull you apart from the other 12. And when we're alone, that's when he can defeat you. The Bible is full of examples showing our need for others in our lives. You know, Jesus, he did not live a life alone and separated when he walked this earth. You know, if anyone didn't fit in, you ever feel like you just don't fit in sometimes? We all feel that way at times. But if anyone didn't fit in, it was Jesus. Think about it. He's Emmanuel, God in the flesh. I don't think I can say that about any one of you guys. And I know you can't say that about me. But Jesus, that was him. And you know, Jesus had hundreds of people that followed him everywhere. But you know, you can be alone in a crowd. You can be in a church of 100, 500, 1,000, and be alone. But Jesus chose 12 men to be with him at all times. And from those 12, he chose 3 to be the closest. Peter, James, and John. I just had a thought here. That's not in my notes here, so I might get myself in trouble about saying it. But you know what? If you want to have someone close to you, you're going to have to go after that relationship. I'll take that back. I've had one. And he was my first, and he came after me. But every close relationship I've had in the church, I've had to go after. I had to make the telephone calls. I had to set the appointments. I many times had to carry the conversation at the beginning. But when you do that and you draw that other person in, you will change yourself, but you'll change them too. And that's what Jesus did. He chose these 12 men, and then he chose those 3. See, he knew that he couldn't teach everyone. He picked a few, and he poured his life and his time into them. And then he would expect them to do the same after he was gone. He allowed them to see the real Jesus. And they needed him, didn't they? But you ever thought about Jesus needing them? He needed them in his life too. Go to Matthew 26. Matthew chapter 26, verse 36. Critical moment. Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane. He's just a few hours from the cross. He knows what's coming. He knows the pain that's about to be inflicted on him. Verse 36. But Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane. And he said to them, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." He took Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, there's Peter, James, and John, along with him. And he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Look at verse 38. Then he said to them, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." At that point, Jesus needed these friends in his life. He wanted them close with him. He needed their comfort and their encouragement. Paul allowed people into his life too. Paul did not have an easy life. He talked about it in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, starting in verse 8. He talked about all the difficulties that he'd been going through, how hard it was. says in verse 8, "We do not want you to be uninformed, brothers, about the hardships we suffered in the province of Asia. We were under great pressure, far beyond our abilities to endure, so that we despaired even of life." He had a difficult time, didn't you? But that's not what I want you to see. I want you to see what he said as he was going through this difficult time. Did you notice the plural of the pronouns? We are. See, he wasn't going through it alone. He had other people in his life. Look over to look chapter 2 there in 2 Corinthians. I want to show you, I think this is such an interesting verse into Paul's character. You know, we think of the Apostle Paul, the great evangelist. You ever think of Paul ever ignoring people who wanted to hear the gospel? Ever think he would do that? Look at verse 8. Verse 12. 2 Corinthians 2:12. "Now, when I went to Troas to preach the gospel of Christ and found the Lord had opened the door for me, I still had no peace of mind because I did not find my brother Titus there. So I said goodbye to them and went on to Macedonia." Notice that he said the Lord had opened a door for him to preach the gospel. People wanted to hear it. And what did he do? He left. Why did he leave? Because his soul was hurting. He was hurting over Titus, and we learn later on, over the church in Corinth and what was going on there. He'd heard his friends were in trouble. And so he left an open door. Turn over to chapter 7. Verse 5. "But when we came into Macedonia, this body of ours had no rest, but we were harassed at every turn, conflicts on the outside, fears within. But God, who comforts the downcast, comforted us by the coming of Titus. And not only by his coming, but also by the comfort you had given him. He told us about your longing for me, your deep sorrow, your ardent concern for me, so that our joy was greater than ever." He found comfort. He found what he was looking for in the coming of Titus. And things were right for Paul again. Go with me to 2 Timothy chapter 4 now. Verse 9. Paul's in prison. And he believes he's about to be executed. He thinks his time on earth is growing short. And he's hurting. Listen to him. Verse 9. Talking to Timothy, he says, "Do your best to come to me quickly. For Demas," and by the way, Demas was a companion of his. He was a friend of Paul's. "For Demas, because he loved this world, has deserted me and gone to Thessalonica. Crescens has gone to Galatia, and Titus to Dalmatia. Only Luke is with me. Get Mark and bring him with you, because he is helpful to me in my ministry. I sent Tychicus to Ephesus. When you come, bring the cloak that I left with Carpus at Troas, and my scroll, especially my parchment." When you're hurting, don't you want someone around you, people around you who can comfort you? Don't you just want somebody to come up to you and put their arm around you and say, "Poor baby"? Or a poor baby can really help a lot during those times. And I think that's what Paul wanted. Some of his closest friends, like Demas, had deserted him. Some had gone on to other ministries. I think it's interesting he called for Mark to be brought to him because he's helpful to me in my ministry. You remember who Mark was? Last time we heard of Mark, you know what Mark had done? He had deserted Paul. That was years ago on his first missionary journey. And later on, Barnabas, then back then Barnabas and Paul, they were the missionary team that was going out, and Barnabas wanted to take Mark again, and Paul said, no way! He deserted us before. I don't want him coming back with us. He'll desert us again. And him and Barnabas got into an argument, and it was so bad that they decided to end their relationship, and Paul went this way, and Barnabas went that way. And Barnabas took Mark with him. But now, towards the close of his life, he says, get me Mark. I need Mark. You know what the difference was? Barnabas. Barnabas did not give up on Mark. Paul did at that time, but Barnabas didn't. He's got the name the son of encouragement for something. And he worked with Mark and made Mark a vessel useful to the Apostle Paul late in his life. Just like love, openness of one's life should be a characteristic of a Christian. I wonder if we can really have love without being open with one another. I personally don't think we can. I think that might be something that's missing in our relationships in the church today. I want to show you how Paul characterized his ministry. Turn with me to 1 Thessalonians Chapter 2. 1 Thessalonians Chapter 2. We're going to start in the middle of verse 6. Paul says, we were not looking for praise from men, not from you or anyone else. As apostles of Christ, we could have been a burden to you, but we were gentle among you, like a mother caring for her little children. We loved you so much that we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well, because you had become so dear to us. Surely you remember, brothers, our toil and hardship. We worked night and day in order not to be a burden to anyone while we preached the gospel to you. You are our witness, and so is God, of how holy, righteous, and blameless we were among you who believed. For you know that we dealt with each of you as a father deals with his own children, encouraging, comforting, and urging you to live lives worthy of God, who calls you into his kingdom and glory. Paul could say this to the church in Thessalonica. You knew me. You know who I am because of the openness of my life. He said, I didn't just share the gospel with you. In verse 8, he said, I shared my life as well. It was his life that brought the gospel alive. Brothers and sisters, we live in a time when many people are closed to the gospel. They're closed. There was a time when people were open, and personally talking to people on the street about Jesus and church was easy because everybody was religious. And evangelism pretty much amounted to arguing doctrines with them and trying to get them to see what the Bible said about doctrine. People today don't care about Jesus, and they especially don't care about doctrine. You can talk to them about it, but it's just going one ear and out the other. That doesn't mean we don't share the gospel. But we got to share our lives first. They got to first see the gospel today living in our lives if we're going to have an impact upon the world. And we're going to bring people into church. We don't abandon the gospel. We just show them the gospel at work every day as we live our lives. We become a sermon to them, brothers. That's what we're supposed to do. And in sharing with others, we need to be open to them with our lives. And you know what? We will let Christ shine through us. Isn't that what Christ said to do in the Sermon on the Mount? We are to let our light shine. Okay? 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 11. Paul was having trouble with the Corinthians. You know, Paul spent 3 years there preaching the gospel. He spent more time in Corinth than he did any other ministry where he ministered at. They knew him. In verse 11, he said this, 2 Corinthians 6:11. He says, we have spoken freely to you, Corinthians, and opened wide our hearts to you. We're not withholding our affection from you, but you are withholding yours from us. As a fair exchange, I speak to you as my children. Open wide your hearts also. He set an example for 3 years. He set an example for them. He reminded them of his openness. I'm sure he was the same with them as he was with the Thessalonians. That made Paul vulnerable. Did you know that? When you open your life to someone, you're opening yourself up to vulnerability. You're opening yourself up to being hurt, to being rejected. Paul did that. And guess what? At this moment, he was being rejected by these people he had poured so much time into. I think vulnerability is one of the main reasons that we close up. That's why I did. Remember what I said in that song? What was it? Let me see here. Let me back up to it. Where was it? A rock feels no pain, and an island never cries. Brothers and sisters, to be truly open with one another, we've got to risk being hurt, being rejected, being exposed. Because when you open up to somebody, guess what? They're going to see you in ways you might not want them to see you. And the mask will come off. And the real you will be left standing there. But that's okay. Because that's what God has called us to do. That's when we really start to get serious about our own lives. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 19. Paul says, though I am free and belong to no man, I make myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. To the Jews I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law I became like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, but under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak I became weak to win the weak. I have become all things to all men so that by all possible means I might save some. I do this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings. Some people might call this an extreme attitude. Paul was extreme at times. Some people might hear this and say, well, what about my rights? I have the right to live my life any way that I want to. Paul was willing to empty himself for others. Let me rephrase that. He was willing to empty himself for Jesus. Because, see, when we do it for others, that's who we're doing it for. See, Paul met people where they were at. And in doing so, Jesus shined into their hearts through him. Hebrews 3:12 through 13 tells us that openness is a powerful weapon in our struggle against sin. Hebrews 3:12 through 13. See to it, brothers, that none of you have a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God, but encourage one another daily, as long as it is called today, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. I want you to notice, he's talking about daily openness. How many of you talk to a Christian that you're close to every day? Encourage one another daily, as long it is called today. What's today? Oh, it's today. You know what tomorrow will be when it gets here? It'll be today. Tuesday, when it gets here, will be today. So every day you wake up and say, is it today? Yes, it's today. You need to be in contact with a Christian, with a close Christian that you can share with. Okay? That doesn't even look like a suggestion to me. And by the way, communication is a two-way conflict. I sometimes get people say, you hadn't called me. Well, the last time I looked, telephones work both ways. Okay, they do. If you don't think I've called you and you'd like to talk to me, please call me, because you know what? I enjoy that. I enjoy it when people call me. They say, Charles, I just want to call and find out how you're doing. Be careful, you might find out. Verse 12 says, see to it that none of you have a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God. The threat of falling away, brothers and sisters, is real. And the way we deal with it is through daily contact with one another. It says, so that you will not be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. Sin is deceitful. I can't always see what sin is doing to me and doing in my life. But you can. You can see it in me a lot better than I can see it in myself, and vice versa, by the way. I can see it in you too. You know, that's where David failed in the Old Testament. He had sent all his advisors away. He was alone, gazing at the stars one night from the roof of his palace, and he looked down and he saw a beautiful woman named Bathsheba. That's where he lost it. He was alone, and sin deceived him and got through. Here's the deal. God has given us one another, sinful and imperfect, to help us to strive to perfection. Figure that one out. Remember Proverbs 27:17, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. We are sinful. We're mean-spirited. We're arrogant. We're insensitive. We're sometimes nasty. But we're also created in the image of God. There's nothing closer to God on earth than a man, even in our sin, allowing him to be abused by others in order to serve. Because wasn't that what the cross was about? And that's when we become more like God, when we open ourselves up and we allow others in and we risk ourselves. Is your heart open or closed? That's the question for us today. When I became a Christian, I had to choose. I had to decide whether I was going to be open or be closed. I had to realize I could no longer be a rock, as the Simon and Garfunkel song said. Jesus called me to a higher purpose. In fact, Jesus has called all of us to leave behind our self-doubt and our self-centeredness, and to be involved in one another's lives for their sake, and for their salvation. We pride ourselves on our self-sufficiency. Aren't we taught that in this country? Aren't we taught to stand up for ourselves and to be self-sufficient? God never called us to self-sufficiency. He called us to service. Many people live their life with the philosophy of the Simon and Garfunkel song, I am a rock. And way too many people feel alone in this world, even in a crowd. And it's a real shame when we Christians choose to live that way. Paul told the Corinthians, I've opened wide my heart to you, and now you need to open wide your heart also. Are you ready today to open your heart? We need to be a congregation of open hearts. But first, you need to open wide your heart to God if you've never done that. Are you ready to surrender yourself to Him by repenting of your sins and being baptized to have those sins forgiven? You know, God opened His heart up to us when He put His Son on the cross. He risked our rejection when His Son died there for us. You need to open your heart to Him. Maybe you've been a rock yourself for far too long, and it's time to open up. It's time to soften up and to get involved and let others into your life. Maybe it's time you realize today, I need to open my heart up. Whether you need to open your heart up to God or you need to open your heart up to one another. We want to give you an opportunity to do that today. You know, that's what the invitation is about. The invitation is about openness. It's not about people who just want to become Christians. It's not just about people who have really, really sinned, you know, and they need to really come forward and confess it to us. It's about us. We have things in our lives that we need to share with one another. Maybe you've just been having a bad week. You've been struggling. I just want the prayers of the church today. Maybe you need that. Maybe you have some need in your life. That's what this is about. Okay? I find it sad that in most churches the invitation is rarely used. I'd like to see us change that and make this a time that we, you know, people come forward and you hear people, I wonder what they did. Okay? You see somebody maybe that comes one too often and they say, boy, that person must really be bad. No. Sometimes that's indication of an open heart. Anyway, we can help you today. Why don't you come when we stand and sing?